The sun had barely risen when Reverend James awoke on that special morning in Hope Haven. His tired eyes, marked by decades of dedication to the community, sparkled with youthful anticipation. After 15 years of saving every possible penny, the day had finally arrived to fulfill his dream, buying a car to better serve his congregation. As he prepared to leave for the neighboring town of Evergreen, James observed through the window of his modest room in the parish house the movement of people starting their day. Sarah Thompson, a 78-year-old lady who lived on the outskirts of town, waved from her porch while waiting for the bus that rarely passed by. It was for people like her that James had made the difficult decision to sell the church's small plot of land. "Reverend, are you sure you want to do this?" Deacon Peterson's voice echoed in his memory, filled with concern during the last council meeting. "That land could be used to expand our church in the future." James had responded with his characteristic serenity, "The true church isn't in the walls we build, but in the hearts we reach." Tucking his old Bible into his worn jacket pocket, James recalled every moment that had brought him here. The long walks under the scorching sun to visit the sick, the winter nights braving the snow to bring comfort to those in need, and the countless times he had to depend on others' goodwill for transportation. On his small desk, a pile of letters from church members revealed touching stories of people who had contributed to his car fund. Little Annie, just 8 years old, had donated all her savings, exactly $7.43 in coins, because, according to her, Jesus also walked around helping people. The envelope with the money still held her childish drawing of a colorful car with Reverend James at the wheel. Before leaving, James knelt for his morning prayer. "Lord," he whispered, "may this day be guided by your wisdom. I seek neither luxury nor ostentation, only a means to better serve those whom you have entrusted to my care." His words were sincere, carrying the same humility that had characterized him throughout his 57 years of life. The community was beginning to wake when James crossed Hope Haven's central square. Baker Johnson, who always opened his shop before dawn, called out, "Reverend, today's the big day, isn't it? Here, take these fresh loaves for your journey." The simple gesture filled the religious man's eyes with contained tears. This was how it was in Hope Haven, small acts of kindness that multiplied daily. At the bus stop, James met young Michael, one of the few teenagers who still regularly attended church. "Reverend, you're going to get the best car of all," exclaimed the boy enthusiastically. James smiled, knowing his expectations were much more modest. "The best car, Michael, is the one that allows us to serve others." When the bus finally arrived, James climbed the steps with a racing heart. In his hands, the envelope containing the savings of a lifetime represented more than money. It was the symbol of a community united by a higher purpose. As the vehicle left the limits of Hope Haven, the Reverend couldn't imagine that his journey would be far more transformative than he could anticipate. The city of Evergreen was considerably larger than Hope Haven, its modest skyscrapers and busy streets representing a stark contrast to the tranquility of Reverend James's home. The bus dropped him off near the commercial district, where several dealerships displayed their gleaming vehicles under the morning sun. The windows of Premium Motors immediately caught his attention. The cars on display sparkled like jewels under the natural light streaming through the immense glass panels. James straightened his worn tie and smoothed his jacket before entering, carrying with him not just his savings, but the hopes of an entire community. The interior environment was sophisticated, with marble flooring and soft ambient music. The salespeople, all impeccably dressed, were either conversing with potential customers or typing on their modern computers. James noticed the strange looks as soon as he crossed the revolving door, but maintained his dignity intact, as he had always done throughout his life. Ethan Parker, a young salesman no more than 25 years old, approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His Italian suit and luxury watch seemed to scream status, contrasting with the Reverend's simplicity. "Can I help you?" "The social services section is downtown," he said, his tone mixing condescension and disdain. "Actually," James responded serenely, "I'm here to buy a car. I have sufficient savings and would like to see some of your more basic models." He held the envelope tighter, feeling the weight of each bill stored there, each one representing a sacrifice, a story, a blessing. Ethan's smile transformed into a contained laugh. "Sir, sorry, what did you say your name was?" "Reverend James," he responded with dignity. "Ah, Reverend," Ethan continued, emphasizing the title with slight sarcasm, "our most basic cars start at prices that, well, might not be compatible with your situation." Other salespeople began to gather around, some disguising smiles, others not bothering to hide their disdain. James felt the weight of humiliation, but maintained his serene composure. Years of ministry had taught him that true dignity comes from within. "Young man," James said in a calm voice, "I didn't come here to be judged by my appearance. I came because I have saved money, honestly earned, to purchase a vehicle that will help me serve my community better." His words carried no anger, only a quiet determination that momentarily silenced the gathering crowd of salespeople. A customer who had been watching the scene from across the showroom shook his head in disgust at the staff's behavior. The moment hung heavy in the air as Ethan's smirk wavered slightly, but the young salesman quickly recovered his condescending demeanor. "Perhaps, Reverend, you might find something more suitable at one of the used car lots on the outskirts of town?" James looked around the showroom one last time, his eyes taking in the gleaming vehicles that suddenly seemed less bright. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his shoulders straight and his head held high. As he pushed through the revolving door, he could hear the murmur of laughter behind him, but his heart remained unburdened by bitterness. He knew that somewhere in this city, God had prepared a different path for him. The midday sun cast long shadows as Reverend James walked slowly down Maple Street, his mind wrestling with doubt but his spirit remaining steadfast. The envelope in his pocket seemed heavier now, weighted not just with money but with the trust of his entire congregation. He paused at a small coffee shop, more to gather his thoughts than to rest his feet, when something caught his eye across the street. "Wilson's Family Auto Sales," read the modest sign above a small dealership. Unlike the gleaming fortress of premium motors, this establishment had a welcoming, unpretentious air about it. Potted plants decorated the entrance, and through the windows, James could see a casual, comfortable waiting area with a coffee machine and what appeared to be homemade cookies on a table. As he approached the entrance, a young woman looked up from her desk and smiled warmly. Her name tag read Emily Wilson, and there was something familiar about her face that James couldn't quite place. She wore a simple blue blazer, and her desk was adorned with family photos and a small cross pendant hanging from her computer monitor. "Welcome," Emily said, rising to greet him. "I'm Emily. How can I help you today?" Her voice carried genuine warmth, devoid of the judgment he'd encountered earlier. James introduced himself, somewhat hesitantly now, but Emily's eyes lit up with recognition. "Reverend James? From Hope Haven?" she exclaimed. "I grew up there. My grandmother, Martha Wilson, used to bake pies for the church fundraisers. You visited her every week when she was ill with pneumonia 5 years ago." The memory clicked into place, and James remembered the sweet elderly lady who always insisted on praying for him despite her own condition. Martha's granddaughter. Of course, James smiled, feeling the tension from his earlier experience melting away. "She was always so proud of you, studying business in college. She showed me your photos every time I visited." Emily's eyes misted slightly. "She always told me how you brought her comfort during those difficult days. When she recovered, she said it wasn't just the medicine, it was the power of faith and community." She gestured to a chair near her desk. "Please, sit down. Tell me what brings you to Evergreen today." As James explained his mission and the years of saving, Emily listened intently, occasionally nodding in understanding. When he mentioned his experience at Premium Motors, her expression darkened momentarily, but she quickly brightened. "Well, Reverend, you've come to the right place. We might not have marble floors, but we have something better, honest cars for honest people." She pulled out a folder and began showing him various options, carefully considering his needs and budget. "These models are perfect for rural roads, and they're reliable, exactly what you need for visiting parishioners in remote areas." Her expertise was evident, but it was her genuine desire to help that touched James the most. As they discussed options, other customers entered the dealership, but Emily ensured someone else attended to them, dedicating her full attention to helping James find the perfect vehicle. She understood that this wasn't just about transportation, it was about continuing a mission of service and compassion. "You know," Emily said thoughtfully while reviewing some paperwork, "I remember how you used to walk miles to visit people in need, regardless of weather or distance. Having a car will help you reach even more people." She paused, then added with determination, "We're going to find you the perfect car today, Reverend. I promise you that." A wealthy-looking gentleman sitting in the waiting area had been quietly observing their interaction while presumably waiting for his own vehicle to be serviced. He seemed particularly interested when Emily mentioned Hope Haven, occasionally glancing their way with an unreadable expression. Little did James know that this observer would soon play a pivotal role in his journey. The afternoon light streamed through the windows of Wilson's family auto sales as Emily finished calculating the final numbers. Her expression shifted slightly, and James noticed a small crease of concern form between her eyebrows. She double-checked the figures, then looked up at him with apologetic eyes. "Reverend James," she began gently, "I've found the perfect car for your needs. It's reliable, good on rough roads, and has excellent fuel economy. But..." She hesitated. "There's been a recent tax increase on vehicle sales in the state. Even with our best discount, we're still about $3,000 above your budget." James felt his heart sink. He opened the envelope and looked at the carefully saved money inside, years of dedication, community support, and personal sacrifice. Each bill told a story: the birthday checks he'd saved instead of buying new clothes, the donations from congregation members who barely had enough for themselves, little Annie's coins carefully wrapped in paper. "I understand," he said quietly, trying to mask his disappointment. "Perhaps it's not meant to be right now. God's timing is always perfect, even when we don't understand it." He began to carefully fold the envelope closed, his fingers trembling slightly. The well-dressed gentleman who had been observing them stood up from his seat in the waiting area and approached their desk. "Excuse me," he said, his voice warm but authoritative. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. My name is Thomas Richardson." Emily's eyes widened in recognition. Thomas Richardson was one of the most successful business owners in Evergreen, known for his philanthropy but rarely seen in public. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside James. "Reverend," he continued, "I've been sitting here for the past hour, watching how this young lady has treated you with such respect and dedication. It's refreshing to see, especially..." He paused, "especially after what you experienced at Premium Motors." James looked surprised, and Thomas smiled. "Yes, I was there too. I left right after you did. I couldn't stand watching how they treated you. I followed you here because I wanted to see if you'd find what you were looking for." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his checkbook. "I'd like to cover the difference," he said simply. "No strings attached." Before James could protest, Thomas raised his hand. "Please, let me explain why. 10 years ago, my mother lived in a small town much like Hope Haven. She was ill, and the local minister would visit her regularly, bringing not just spiritual comfort but also helping with groceries and medicine. He never asked for anything in return, never complained about the long walks or bad weather. When she passed away, that minister was there for our family, supporting us through our grief." Thomas's eyes grew misty as he continued, "I've been blessed with success in business, but I've never forgotten the kindness of that minister. When I saw you today, I saw him, the same humble dedication to serving others. This is my chance to pay forward the kindness that was shown to my family." Emily sat quietly, watching the scene unfold with tears in her eyes. The dealership had fallen silent, other customers and staff pausing to witness this unexpected moment of grace. James began, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Mr. Richardson, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Thomas smiled, already writing the check. "Just promise you'll keep doing what you're doing. Sometimes, Reverend, angels come in unexpected forms. Today, I get to be one of them." As Thomas handed the check to Emily, James noticed something peculiar. Through the window, a familiar face was watching. It was Ethan from Premium Motors, standing across the street with an unreadable expression. The young salesman quickly turned away when he realized he'd been spotted, but not before James caught a glimpse of what looked like shame in his eyes. The events at Wilson's Family Auto Sales quickly became the talk of both Evergreen and Hope Haven. By late afternoon, as Emily helped James complete the paperwork for his new car, a reliable silver Honda perfect for rural roads, local news reporter Sarah Chen had already caught wind of the story. She sat in the dealership's waiting area, discreetly taking notes on her tablet. "Reverend," Emily said, sliding the final document across her desk, "there's something else you should know." She pulled up a spreadsheet on her computer. "After Mr. Richardson left, I received 5 phone calls from other local business owners. They want to help outfit your car for its special purpose." James looked up from signing the papers, his eyebrows raised in surprise. Emily continued, her eyes bright with excitement, "Henderson's Auto Parts is donating a heavy-duty battery and all-weather tires. The mobile medicine shop wants to install a small refrigeration unit for transporting medications to homebound parishioners. And Wilson's, that's my father's company, will provide free maintenance for the first year." Outside the dealership's windows, the late afternoon sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, as if nature itself was celebrating the day's events. A small crowd had gathered, including some familiar faces from Hope Haven who had made the journey after hearing about what happened at Premium Motors. "I don't deserve all this attention," James said softly, watching the growing crowd through the window. Emily touched his hand gently. "Reverend, sometimes we don't see the impact we have on others. This isn't just about a car anymore, it's about recognizing goodness in a world that often forgets to look for it." As they talked, the bell above the door chimed. Ethan, the young salesman from Premium Motors, walked in hesitantly. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by a humbled demeanor. The showroom fell silent as he approached James and Emily's desk. "Reverend James," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I came to apologize." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "What I did, how I treated you, it was inexcusable. I was raised better than that." James watched the young man carefully, seeing not the arrogant salesman from that morning, but a person capable of growth and change. Ethan continued, pulling an envelope from his pocket, "I spoke with my manager. Premium Motors would like to contribute to equipping your car for community service. But more importantly," he swallowed hard, "I'd like to volunteer at Hope Haven's community outreach program, if you'll have me." The transformation in Ethan's demeanor was striking. Gone was the superficial smile and condescending tone, replaced by genuine remorse and a desire for redemption. Sarah Chen, the reporter, had quietly moved closer, her tablet forgotten as she witnessed this unexpected scene. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Through the window, James could see Baker Johnson from Hope Haven distributing fresh rolls to people, turning the dealership's parking lot into an impromptu community gathering. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman he often visited, had somehow made the journey and was sharing stories with Emily's father about the times Reverend James had helped her during winter storms. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the showroom floor, James realized that his simple quest for a car had become something far greater. It had become a catalyst for change, a reminder of the power of dignity in the face of dismissal, and the transformative nature of kindness. Emily, watching the scene unfold, smiled knowingly. "You know, Reverend," she said, "my grandmother always used to say that God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes it takes a moment of challenge to reveal the true heart of a community." Sunday morning dawned bright and clear in Hope Haven, the kind of perfect autumn day that seemed designed for new beginnings. The small church parking lot was unusually full, with cars spilling onto the street and people walking from blocks away. Among the vehicles sat a silver Honda, now equipped with everything needed to serve the community, its pristine surface reflecting the morning sunlight. Inside the church, every pew was filled. Familiar faces from Hope Haven mingled with visitors from Evergreen. Thomas Richardson sat quietly in the back row, having declined the offered front seat. Emily and her father had brought Martha Wilson, Emily's grandmother, who beamed with pride from her wheelchair. Even Sarah Chen, the reporter whose article had touched hearts across both communities, sat with her notebook closed, simply taking in the moment. Ethan, wearing a modest suit rather than his usual designer attire, sat nervously among the congregation. The past week had transformed him. He had already spent several afternoons helping at Hope Haven's community center, learning firsthand about the people he had once dismissed with a sneer. As Reverend James stood at the pulpit, his eyes swept across the gathered faces. Little Annie sat in the front row, clutching a new drawing, this one showing not just the car, but a whole community of smiling people around it. Behind her, Mrs. Thompson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, remembering how James had already used the car twice that week to bring her to medical appointments. Today, James began, his voice warm and steady, "I want to talk about something more valuable than any earthly possession. More precious than any vehicle, more powerful than any amount of money." He paused, making eye contact with various members of the congregation. "I want to talk about community." He shared the story of his journey, not just the events of that transformative day at the dealerships, but the years of saving, the small sacrifices made by so many, and the unexpected ways in which God had worked through people to create something beautiful. What started as a simple need for transportation, he continued, became a reminder of how we are all connected. Every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, creates ripples that touch lives we may never know about. He gestured to Ethan. Sometimes, what appears to be a moment of rejection becomes an opportunity for growth and change. Thomas Richardson nodded silently, thinking of his own mother and the minister who had inspired his act of generosity. Emily squeezed her grandmother's hand, remembering the stories of James's visits during her illness. Throughout the church, similar moments of recognition and reflection played out in quiet gestures and gentle smiles. "The car parked outside isn't just a vehicle," James said, his voice growing stronger. "It's a testament to what we can achieve when we open our hearts to one another. It's a symbol of faith, not just in God, but in the goodness that exists within each of us, waiting to be awakened." As he concluded his sermon, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the congregation in rainbow hues. The church filled with the sound of the old organ as the choir began to sing, their voices joined by the entire congregation. The harmony of dozens of voices, some practiced, some awkward, but all sincere, rose to the rafters. Outside, Hope Haven continued its quiet Sunday morning routine. But something had changed in the small town. The silver Honda in the parking lot stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest miracles aren't the big, dramatic events, but the small acts of kindness that ripple outward, touching life after life, transforming communities one heart at a time. And in that moment, as voices raised in song and sunshine poured through windows, the true meaning of community, of faith, hope, and love in action, was not just spoken or heard, but lived and felt in every heart present. End of story. Dear viewers, we hope Reverend James's story of faith, transformation, and community has touched your heart. In a world that often seems divided, tales like these remind us of the extraordinary power of kindness and understanding. They show us how a single act of compassion can create ripples that transform entire communities. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support enables us to continue sharing these powerful narratives that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Perhaps you've witnessed or experienced similar moments of unexpected kindness in your own life. Join our growing community of storytellers and listeners, where each story we share aims to inspire, uplift, and remind us of the goodness that exists in the world. Together, we can spread hope and kindness, one story at a time.